Okay, so team for GitHub Actions, I think this is the course material we have from MS Learn. Okay, so if you see the modules, we have around 6 modules covering around 5 hours and 30 minutes. Again, here, idea is you should have at least 6 months to 1 year of experience working with the workflows, because that way it will be very easy for you to navigate. And if you see, I have already given you the introduction to GitHub, and there was an exercise in this, which will give you the look and feel along with the exercise. Okay, so if you see this exercise, if someone is starting new, this will be very helpful for you to know what those terminologies. So that is the reason I started this first, so that you go through each and every terminology and do the kind of a tour of GitHub, how it looks like. Okay, so that module I think we already covered as a part of giving you the administration part. Okay, now let's start with our GitHub Actions module. Uh, so in this module, coming to how do you automate. Okay, so GitHub Actions, again, the name as it applies, it is related to workflow. Okay, how do you automate? Now, how do you actually work with the collaboration element is what it is talking about. Okay, and coming from the exam perspective, uh, they will give you a construct, okay, or how they should flow for that particular. Say suppose if I have to give you the workflow, how the workflow should start, like I will name the workflow and how that workflow is triggered. That means on that particular, it can be pull request, it can be commit, okay, it can be anything, what is happening within that repository or a specific folder. And then following on, there will be obviously the machines which we work through, and finally the jobs take care, or the actions happen which actually does a job for us on that particular machine. So it can be build, it can be your testing, it can be final deployment on your Azure as an environment. Okay, so this is what is this particular module will test for. Okay, so these are the way how your goals are, why you want to automate. So just go through them, because there will be obviously 1 or 2 questions around that. What are the main purpose of having this in place? What is the what problem it resolves? Okay. Similarly, how to navigate through GitHub Actions and what to use out of box is what they are showing you in this particular learning path. Okay, and what is available to you from the marketplace. So obviously you can go to the GitHub marketplace, or within your actions tab, you can see and search for respective uh, actions. Okay. Similarly, if you want to go by the categories as well, you can see from an API, code quality, code review, CI perspective. Okay, similarly, if you want to look for container, and go to the respect to that. If you want to look for some dependency management, it can be caching, it can be integration with a number of things. Just go through these each and every terminologies, or I would say the categories, to understand what we can get from a readily available actions. So in short, actions are nothing but the small scripts which does some job for us. Okay, so now, um as I said, it will ask you the construct of what the action is all about. Okay, so here the important file, if you are creating your own action, is action.yml. Okay, this is a kind of a metadata file, or I would say this is where you will define what the input should look like for the action, what the output should get, and how actually we interact, or how we automate, how do you use this from a workflow file. Okay, so now they are giving you 2 options of what kind of actions are available to you. You have the container actions and you have a JavaScript actions, which is faster, obviously JavaScript. So though that will be the question as well. The reason is simple. Container has to create a complete image and deploy within that in a controlled environment, whereas JavaScript is something which is not that integrated to the container and it works directly on the machine. So that is faster. So, so just you have to remember those points, and how the look and feel of the action is what they have given you here. The, as I said, the even if you want to get more terminologies, I think you can go to the workflow GitHub workflow syntax. Let me open that as well in the parallel. So ideally, if before starting with this, I started with this as well. Okay, so as I said, I have to name this, right? What are the files should look like? How the triggers should be? How the multiple events? Also, there will be a question on what are the multiple events triggering this workflow? Whether it is on pull request, whether it is on push, whether it is on the repository, whether it is on any particular schedule, or there is also how any external event is triggering this particular workflow. There can be n number of events which can trigger our workflow. Okay. Similarly, how you label that, how you recognize when you actually do, what are the ways you can use for your own self-hosted runners, how you can involve them in your workflow versus what is available from what is the terminology, what is the look. And so this document provides you a lot of information on how to construct your workflow. Okay, so that this will be very helpful. Again, this also I will share once we have we cover this particular topic. Okay, so this is just giving a small snap of what we have shown in the workflow syntax. Okay, so ideally they will give you something, this particular say snap of this and tell you what this particular step is doing, how many actions are involved in that, something of that sort. And then you have to identify what actions is taking. Similarly, they will give you something here and they will ask you something is wrong here. And this particular YAML action.yaml is not working. What is wrong here? So you have to just see what is the wording and if they have missed something from the construct. So as I said, this is very, so you have to always go to the from the workflow syntax, and there is also something which you learn from this particular module, right? So like how and what it runs, or what is the baseline, whether it is a CLI or which action I'm using, that information will only come from if I have used that workflow. That means simple example I can give you is login, right? So until I authenticate, if that is missing, obviously the all the steps after that will fail. So that is what they will ask you to troubleshoot while you go through the actions exam. Not troubleshoot means they will ask you in that questions. Okay, so you don't have to do anything hands-on, but I think they will ask you the series of questions after that. Okay, so so input section, and say suppose someone gives me this exam and they will tell me if I have not passed any name to this. Okay, what will be the what it will produce? So I would say it will produce just hello world. If I give a name, then it will give you hello and the name. So that is how they will challenge you, saying what this workflow will do, why the workflow is not running, what is wrong with this workflow. So there will be a n number of questions, because here if you see, coming back to the our actual GitHub exams, you can get around authoring and maintaining itself, you have around 29 questions. And then after maintaining those actions, that means creating your own actions, you have 18 questions around that. So that is the reason you have to be very through while you move through this particular section or the GitHub actions, that you understand that how this GitHub workflow is working through. Okay, so that was the one thing. Okay, so actually we now know the basic workflow syntax, which I've shown you. You can go through that, and then what are the files required? Okay, the action.yaml is required. Similarly, on which directory this particular workflow should be placed. The workflow should be placed in .github, and there will be a simple questions as well, like suppose which as they are giving here. They will tell you the workflow is placed in the .github, but it is not running. What is the problem with that? So obviously you have to move that workflow to the workflows directly for it to be triggered, or for GitHub to know that trigger. So this kind of simple questions also can be there. Okay. Similarly, say suppose they will give you this particular and tell you what are the triggers here. So obviously the triggers are from push towards this. Similarly, there's also a pull. Similarly, there is a page build. There is also release. So 4 kind of triggers are there. So there can be number, or they will ask you specific on what on this is being getting triggered. Okay, so then they will ask you, as I said, on GitHub hosted versus self-hosted runner. How do you like terminology perspective, whether that is correct or not, or what should be the right way to look at. So if it runs on this is Ubuntu latest, this is something which is on GitHub Cloud, right? Cloud hosted runners. But if something to be done on self-hosted, then it should mention self-hosted, then Linux, then it has to mention the respective particular engine or what that particular machine I'm using along with the architecture is what is recommended. Similarly, say suppose if I have a complex operation and I want to, so I should label that. So from where it is coming, this is actually the labels. So you should understand from where this is coming. This is coming from the labels. OK, so let us move towards identifying the components. Now this gives you a, actually this is covered in the basic introduction to GitHub. That is the reason I have not stressed much on this, how the flow is. OK, so there will also can be a one-off questions on how it flows through. That means name on, then you put jobs. OK, then steps. Kind of this name on jobs and steps, something to how that flows, and they will give you some other options as well, so that they will give you steps first and like kind of a jumbled around, so that you have to how the action is made from, or what flow will look like. So there will be something which they will try out. OK, so first obviously is a workflow. Within the workflow you define on a naming on how they are triggered, and within the trigger you obviously define jobs, and within the jobs you have steps. Steps can consist of any actions. It can be multiple actions. It can be run command lines as well. So that is where these command lines and everything will come here. So this is ideally hosted somewhere else, right? This is the publicly available marketplace actions which you are consuming. Or if you are making your own, then obviously I've shown you that action.yaml, the way you create your own workflows. It requires input, requires an output, and it runs on what technology, and finally how do you call this from your that particular directory on your workflow file. So those all things you have to remember. But in introduction section, I think you will understand based on this, but labs will give you the good hold on these particular actions. OK, similarly, if you're running these actions on the schedule events, then obviously you should remember these stars, right? Say suppose if I have to run every 10 minutes, so and then I will put */10. If I have to run that particular say 0 to 23, this is just an hour. So again slash for that particular count. OK, that means in that 24 hours I have to run twice or thrice. So I have to accordingly partition this again days of month. So this is same following the cron syntax. OK, so this is 15 minutes. Similarly, if you have to run this on Sunday, so this is what they have mentioned. OK, so this is following the same terminology, but there won't be any much, maybe 1 or 2 questions around that. Yeah, now important thing is they will ask you if I have to run or make a arrangement so that I can run the workflow manually. What should I do? What should be the trigger? So in that case, trigger should be workflow dispatch. And this is a terminology which they will ask you for. So this will only come when you work practically on that. But they have given you something on theory, which you can obviously. And if something happens outside of GitHub, then obviously it should call the repository dispatch event. OK, so and they're also giving an example of how something from outside can trigger this workflow. OK, so there is also something inside. How do I call the webhook from GitHub? Then there is check_run event. So you just have to remember these events. So one was the workflow dispatch. Another was repository dispatch, something happening outside of GitHub, and then finally coming to the. OK, so team, sorry, I won't be able to cover the concept of each and everything, but I think if you go through this documentation, I think you can understand, because otherwise this will take at least for me 2 weeks to go through this particular with each and every concept on this. OK, similarly, what is the they will also give you the expressions and saying you what is the right way to call the secrets or the environment variables, how to get a replacement of that in our workflow file. So I think you can understand from the terminology, while your workflow syntax will give you everything. Okay, ideally this is the best place I would say to understand complete workflow, how you call them. Okay, but if you are working practically, then also good way to look at. So suppose if I have to, I have already defined secret, I have to put that secret value here. So I will write secrets dot that whatever is a defined variable. So that will put the value of that secret while say suppose I'm logging to the Azure, then I can. So those all questions will be there for you to answer in those particular GitHub Actions exam. Okay. Similarly, what are the ways, or I would say what is the best or what are the reasons when I have to disable my workflow that it should not run for any reason. What are those reasons? So obviously they will ask you these reasons for that. When it is impacting something negatively, something is not available and is being consuming too much of your billing or minutes, at that time you can disable those workflows. And if something is being completely broken down, or those all things you can also put here. Disabling a workflow can be useful in some situations. So that is the reason in these exams, it is more of a your memory test along with your practical knowledge. If you have worked with that thoroughly, then obviously you know how to navigate. Okay. Also, there will be something on the what each of the already variables like GitHub actor. Similarly, the GitHub references, they are referring to branches. Similarly, there is something on GitHub workspace. So those are kind of the variables which are already defined by the GitHub. So they will ask you what they do and what the respective value they carry. So remember, those are also available. You can just Google around or maybe search in the GitHub docs for that directly as well. Okay. Now, something your organization has created a template and you want to make sure that is available in your organization. So the way you do with your public, it is different from this because here you create a dedicated repository. If something you want to follow internally within your organization, that is .github repository. So remember we give a name to any repository. Like in our case, my repository name is GitHub exams. Okay, but here what they're talking about here is they create a .github repository, which is internal to their organization. Okay, and then everything they place within that is available automatically to that particular organization members is what is meant for these actions. That means I can use this as a repository for my other teams. Correct? Workflow created by organizations will follow accordingly. So this is the way you see in our any of the actions. It gives us an option to set up the workflow. Now this is available. My own actions are available to consume directly. That means if someone does not know how to write the code, they can directly use this setup workflow within the repository if they are just doing the operational work on that. Okay. So that is how you can help. And similarly, I'm creating actions, right? So how do I make sure I'm giving a unique name to them, or they are very specific on how do I identify them by version, or SSA number is nothing but this, or a specific commit. Okay. Similarly, they can also name by branches. So there are some terminologies they have explained how you can version each action. That means I should be aware of what I'm bringing next. Okay, so best is version numbers and just see how they are referred. By default, the actions is from the GitHub. Okay, similarly, there is something from if something Azure is written, obviously those are from the provider, that is Azure. So how do you identify this is the provider and this is the actual action along with the version? So this is how they will ask you questions around that. And commit, there will be obviously the alphanumeric numbers you will have, which is unique to this particular version or the code at that point of time. Okay, so this is the reason they are providing you the different ways to how to version your action. Okay, and as I said, the GitHub actions in each and every module they are given you the exercise to do on your own, and this is nothing but actually if you go to lab.github.com, They are actually brought those basics exercise what they used to do on lab.github in this particular module on MS Lab. So this is creating a content action from scratch. Okay. So again, in interest of time, I will not be going through the knowledge check. Okay, let's move on the other part. CI. So how do I use GitHub Actions to create a CI workflow? So here it gives you the how do you actually navigate the repository and go to which tab and use the already available workflows. So ideally, the good part of this is this gives me complete view of the whatever we have seen in workflow syntax. Name, it can be triggered on two events. One is on push, one is a pull request. I have the jobs build, okay, which runs on a respective, and there's also the naming convention, or I would say this is metrics kind of the multiple node versions, right? This will runs on 10 and 12x. That means this will run two times, one for 10, other for 12. Okay, and the steps below this is nothing but readily available marketplace actions available to me. That means this all are the multiple actions, and this is a multiple command line. That means even if I don't have any action available in marketplace, what I can do is I can run directly the Azure CLIs, I can run the command lines, and also I can bring in something on the, if it is a command line for the PowerShell, if it's command line for Bash, or if it's command line for Python, something of that sort. Okay, so it gives you a structure, explains you each and everything, how it does, and the commands it use. So this is more towards moving through the terminology. And in exercise, you actually do this. Okay, in exercise, you actually create this structure. It takes some time, but I think you are aware of that this is going to run 100% sure because we are going step by step on that. So this is complete metrics. Now, apart from just mentioning the node version numbers, they also now brought the OS versions. So this you will actually implement practically using the labs or exercise which they're giving. Now this will run two times on 8x and 10x will run on Ubuntu latest. Similarly on Windows 2016 also. So total the workflow will run 4 times. Okay, so whatever is done on the runner, how to get access to those build packages or whatever it is creating the config files is using artifacts. So something to take from this machine to the intermediate storage, which is given as a part of actions, is the using with the help of upload artifacts. Okay, and then downloading that in another workflow or another job is using download artifact. I should know only the complete path or the branch to what exactly I did. Say suppose I did this build which is on node and I want to upload that package file. From that package file I've given the name that is a web artifacts and I want to make sure this is available in the particular folder which is public. So I did this within public folder. Then the other job, now till here it was just the build. Other job is test, but I want to make sure obviously the test will not be available until I get the build part. So I want to make sure that it needs the build first, so that I'm making this as a sequential. That means this should run first, this should run second, and then accordingly I move further towards that. Okay, so ideally with these step by step, I think you are now learning to how to create workflows. Okay, now there's also the way have the label when approved. Okay, so that means what it's trying to make sure is with this pull reminders and this action, once it get approval, it will be label approved and it will be helpful for me to run further automated checks. Okay, and this is the way for me to get something which is running internal to my actions. That means using repositories and the actions collaboration. I don't need any password. I can directly consume secrets.github.token. That I think you should know working with the actions within. But if I have to work or do something on my own machine or something to do outside of those GitHub workflows or that runners, then obviously I need the PAD token or the other ways which you have seen from SAML SSO. Okay, so that is what you have to remember. Okay, so again, artifacts, I think I've explained you download and they are giving you these all things and what kind of the commands you can. This is nothing but they are using or applying the build script. As I said, you can also run the bash, which is not available out of box. You can directly create your own script and run that within it workflow. Similarly, if I want to make sure that it does not have to build other dependencies again and again, I have to also cache that. But on the important part or one, I would say the 1 or 2 questions will be on how do you, what is required from the caching perspective. So the path and the key are the 2 required things, and the restore is something which is an optional. So this you get from the documentation directly. So if you see the parameter description and whether required or not, you can make sure that this is yes or no. So key and path are important. This is not required. Okay. Passing artifacts, as I said, this is basically we are doing upload and download. That is the reason we are getting this at this point of time. Okay. And there will be obviously short questions on APIs as well. How do I get a run number of that? So make sure there is also complete list of get because there are like get put the verbs, right, which you can use as an API, REST APIs. So and how do you consume them? Like repos, this is the owner name, repository name, actions, runs, run ID. Okay, so if I just need a run ID, I should stop here. If I want to load the logs for that, I will go ahead and look for the log path. But if I just need a run ID, then that is that get till run ID should be sufficient for me. So they are giving you the exercise, I think very good exercises, and I think they are taken directly from lab.github.com. I tried that around maybe 1 year back. I think exactly the same still now as well. Okay, so that was for this module. Let me move to the other module from the deploying on the Azure. So on deploying on Azure, again, this will give you the complete workflow. Okay, and what the CD. Now, as you know, we did the CI part and we did create an artifacts now, but where to use those artifacts and how to deploy them in a actual scenario on cloud or Azure. Okay, so if you remember, I had said you like that particular action, it based on the pull request reviewed and it actually created the label which was approved, and beyond after it is approved, I think we can move ahead with the deployment part, which will actually check for that particular work which is being going for the deployment. That means after the build and test is done. Okay. Similarly, how to create secrets and how to fetch them. There are 2 ways to create secrets. If something is required for everyone in an organization, it has to be at the org level. If something is only being fetched from the repository, you can create secret at the repository level. Okay, so there will be obviously questions around that as well. How you access the secrets within the workflow. Okay, so this is an example of that, the right way of using that. And the way I've shown in marketplace URL, this which is nothing but this, just search by name or this categories. Okay, make sure you use that in a proper way so that you can get those done. Okay, so here in CD part, they have given you how they do the deployment using web apps. Okay, and how they log into Azure. And obviously here, as we are using the container, a container image needs to be fetched from the container registry. So everything required from the registry getting deployed to the is what is written here. Complete deployment steps are written to it. In exercise also, you will do this step by step. Okay. And finally, obviously, if you have to clean up, we can also set up the way you do the delete resource group. You can also have the CLI for that, the PowerShell for that, whatever way you want to run. Make sure only thing is you are appropriately like while you automate these workflows, you give appropriate labels or fetch those labels at the right time, so that depending upon the activity done on the repository or how that particular file is being labeled. Say suppose if I have to give you an option for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. the task it has to perform. I have to make sure that labels are available, and while I do that particular changes on the label for that particular repository or that particular file while committing, then that particular action get triggers. Okay, so remember everything whatever we are doing here is planned by us. Okay, it should have appropriate structure in place, and how the naming convention flows, that will always get from workflow syntax. Now, previously I've shown you what all the Azure Marketplace way of doing that. Now here, if you see everything, if success is nothing but a condition which checks from the, if a resource group, if or the previous is, say suppose I'm running this. Okay, if this succeeds, if my previous job or step succeeds, then only move further on this, creating this. That means if login is not successful, there is no point creating anything further, right? So that is what it is checking for. Then it will go on creating resource group. And if you see, I don't have any ready-made actions to use for that, but I'm using a CLI in a very effective way. Also, if you have joined me for the labs, which we did on GitHub Actions around 3-4 months back, we did exactly the same thing. Okay, there's no hard and fast that you have to use. If you have a better way, go with that. But in short, what we're trying to say here is we can use already available actions and then use something which is not available in a form or shape from the CLI, from Bash or PowerShell, whichever way you want to use for your that particular workflow. So again, they are giving you an option how this will look like in your in the repositories and what they are using. And something important, I think you might have seen someone using whether the actions are failing, passing. There's an easy way to use that. This is a complete. This is the way to define that. That means if something name which you have to give. Yeah, there should be some name, and replace this with something, or I'm pulling that directly the action ID. Okay, so I'm just pulling the grading.yaml, which was nothing but my workflow. If it succeeds, it will give me success or passing, and the way it has shown. This is how you can apply the badge in your own repository. So I think good way to learn these things if you're completely new to this, step-by-step procedures for you to create your own workflows. Okay, and also in this they are also given you the way how you can get the approvals, automatic approvals in place in this exercise. So you can learn through that as well. Okay, so they have clearly given learning lab, which is nothing but will take you lab.github.com. Again, I'm skipping the knowledge check, moving to the next part. Okay, now what are the GitHub script? They will ask you what is the difference between the workflow or the actions. What is exactly the GitHub script? GitHub script is nothing but the way you can use them in actions or workflows. Okay, so they have given you the introduction on that. Okay, is nothing but something which we can do, automate something on repositories, creating the issues automatically, creating pull request, something to as if I'm working internal to that GitHub and doing the actions on behalf of the service account. So that is what it will be used for. Okay, so there are a lot of things defined within that, what you can do with that. But the easiest way to look at it, create the issues, create some, put the automate, like suppose someone new joined to your organization and you want to greet them welcome and something should happen automatically rather than you going and greeting that in person. Okay, so this happens while you join the GitHub organization and all those things. So this is what it's taken care with the help of GitHub scripts. Okay, similarly, building this workflow on, as I said, this is again the simplest part of, as I said, it has to everything goes on labels, and the labels can be anything of the events. Events can be issues or something which you are doing on the pull perspective, push perspective, outside of repository with a repository dispatch, or something which you want to try manually. It can be anything. Those are all called events. Okay, so this is just giving an example of how they apply a commit, and commit should contain the number and who is the repository owner and how the repository name is and what is the message they want to give with that automated creation of the comment. So this is what they have mentioned here. So while you run through this lab as well, they also have the lab for this. I think you will understand this in better. But as I said, whatever the questions I'm like, whatever the way they would be asking is more towards the concept of that, and how troubleshooting you do, why, what is failing, why it is failing, and all those things, and what are the different types of actions available, whether you can combine the public workflows with the command lines and all those things they will ask. Okay, so as this is a bit lengthy, as there are 72 questions on that, I would say whatever you know, go ahead and flag the others, and move ahead and come back at later, so that you have 2 hours. At times it may be you consider that I think you should be able to complete in time, but at end you will short of time. So that is the reason I'm saying you flag that and go ahead. You can anyway come back and edit that options, whatever you want to recheck that. Okay. Now coming back to the packages. Now this is a last part along with the way you have done the. Now this is something to I have done with my build part. I have done with the deploy part. How do I make others to use this? I want to make this complete repository which is available as a production for release. Okay, so this is what I will do with the GitHub packages. That means once the release is created, I want to make sure this is consumed in a right way by a different team, so that they don't have to do the rework on doing the CI and CI part of that or testing part of that. And finally, I have the package for that particular product. Okay, so this is what they have shown in this particular, what is all about. And if you're working with the containers, obviously I have to store the images. How do I authenticate to that? How do I connect to that is what they have shown you in this particular module. Okay, so again, something can be on what kind of the package managers you use. So you have to make sure you at least remember those package versions. Okay, and similarly, if you are doing something on the testing part or something on maybe one of the other examples, they will ask you to review through what exactly this particular example is giving. Okay, so this is the automated code testing or the code quality for that particular part. Okay, now GitHub packages to the GitHub releases, what they are meant for. So this is one is the consumption, another is actually creating them, right? Publishing what you have. And releases are nothing but release the complete bundle of that software. So this can be one particular library, but I want to make sure everything goes there. So there are two parts to it. One is you can have tar or files or zip files there. So they will ask you what kind of the files you can have downloaded from the release, your tar or zip files. That is obviously you can get from that. Okay, so again, what are the permissioning and how you do that? I think you will learn from this GitHub action. So ideally in this GitHub module, they have done very systematically because they have directly brought the labs itself here, right from introduction and then doing the workflow construct, then putting the CI and testing in place, and finally doing the CD part and then asking you to go and consume the packages and see how the release will look like. Okay, so a very systematic way I think they have given, and these are the step-by-step exercises. And whatever you see here, ideally, this is the construct. Even for troubleshooting, they will give you this kind of YAML files, and they will ask you how it is getting triggered. That is one question. If it is failing, why it is failing? What are the jobs they have? Whether they will run parallelly or not. That is so. Think of the various scenarios they can construct from one particular workflow. Now, if someone will say you what kind of actions I've used or whether I have used the command lines or not, yes or no, so that I can directly tell them, yes, you have used the command lines as well as use the marketplace actions. But if it is not, then I can directly tell from this. And whether any secrets I've used in this workflow, yes, I've used one secret. Is there anything else? What are the different triggers I have? I can get from here. What are the machines on which it is running? I can get from here. What are the versions against? So they can create n number of questions based on the workflow they are providing to you. Okay, so if you have knowledge about that, then obviously that will be, I think you should be able to get through very easily. Similarly, while you do this, what it requires, right? So, or what are the, how do you access those packages from that respective libraries is what you also look at. Okay, because as I've shown you in the previous, there are different libraries based on the packages we are creating, right? So that is what they are put here. Similarly, if you are hosting containers, obviously you have to give the container registry, which is nothing but gcr.io. And this is something the tag which we are appending to the this particular image. Now this image is known to us and we are now pushing this so that it remains the latest for us. Okay, so remember, these all things will be helpful for you. So I think that's all in the actions. uh, I think I can now release it for Q&A for you. Okay, so but as I said, this is mix of the knowledge you have and you have practically work on those labs. So obviously that should be easy for you to clear the exams. That's all. Thanks.